Hi, welcome to week 28, book 28, Gravity's Rainbow. Okay, so first of all, um, this is not for the faint of heart. Um, Thomas Pynchon's 60 novels, this one in particular, are very much full of everything. And I say everything, I mean everything. This one, Gravity's Rainbow in particular, uh, the length and, you know, it is not thin in any respect of the word, um, is a massive, massive, massive book. And there's something in here probably to offend the sensibilities of almost anyone these days. It's a testament to how culture has changed from the 70s to the present that I don't know if a book like this would have been published this way. Now, there are plenty of offensive things in our culture at the moment, but offensive in the way that Pynchon is offensive, not so much, because he is not necessarily trying to offend. Um, Now, maybe in places he is, but this strikes me as a very different kind of cultural moment than the one we live in. Um, Now, of course, B certainly felt that way. Crying Out 49, not necessarily so much so different, but this definitely feels different. Now, what feels different? Well, the language. There's not, well, there's a scene where one of the main characters goes down a toilet. And as he's down the toilet, he sees on the sides all different kinds of encrusted fecal matter. And he discusses where this fecal matter came from. And just so happens that the place he came from, the toilet he went in, was a toilet in Harlem. And this was pre World War II Harlem. This is the Harlem Renaissance, or towards the end of the Harlem Renaissance. And guess who was at this bar? Malcolm X. And guess what this guy was afraid of as his butt hanging out the back end of this toilet? Getting sodomized by um, Malcolm X. Now, time this is set, World War II, Malcolm X is nobody. I mean, nobody's heard of Malcolm X yet. He hasn't done anything on the world stage yet. You know, I'm not sure what he did during World War II, but he wound up in prison for a while. He might have been in prison during World War II. I'm not really sure, but I know he wound up in prison for a while, and that's where he converted to Islam, and that's where he got a lot of his education. So this is prior to all of that, when he was basically a petty thug. Um, and this is used in the book to talk about sort of how race is dealt with in America. But as you can imagine, there are all kinds of words there that I don't want to use here in that section. And there are other sections too that are similar. Uh, there are there is more than one older man who seems to go after a Lolita type, um, 12, 13, younger. There are several young girls who seem to deliberately fit that Lolita type. Um, but, so what's going on here? Okay, so let's back up. The story, such as there is a story, is of a guy named Tyrone Slothrop, who is an American, and he is during World War II. This is 1944, I think, when it begins. Um, and he is stationed in London. Um, and this is before D-Day. And he's stationed in London, and he is doing some information work. Now, there are several different kinds of bombs that were dropped on England during the war, and one of them is the V2. That's the last one, and the V2 was an innovation in that it went faster than the speed of sound. So you would see it go up, and then it would reach what's called Brunschluss, I can't pronounce German, so Brunschluss, um, where the peak of the arc, and then the rocket engine would shut off and it would fall down and go faster than the speed of sound. So if it hit you, you didn't hear it, and if you heard it, it didn't hear you. And it didn't hit you. Let me repeat that. If it hit you, you didn't hear it, and if you heard it, it didn't hit you. So whenever there's this Brunschluss that you can see off in the distance, you know there's one coming in, and it could be the one heading for you, could be the one heading somewhere else. And so you wait, and if you hear it, you know it missed you. So it's sort of a macabre kind of situation going on here, but very importantly, something of a reversal of what we expect. We expect to hear it as it comes in, but we don't. We only hear it after it hits. And so that reversal becomes important. Tyrone Slothrop, he's working in London while these things are falling, and he and everyone else suffers from a certain kind of wartime paranoia because of this. And it just so happens that he keeps a map up on of London up on his wall, and on this map he puts little stars. And what do these stars have to do with anything? Well, he has multiple sexual liaisons with women. Maybe. This is where it gets very complicated. We're given indications later on in the book that maybe the sexual liaisons are partially fantasy, partially real. Maybe all fantasy, maybe all real. We are given indications that all the structures that are built here are flimsy. And why does that matter? Well, the guy who works with um, Slothrop, named Tantivy Mucker Mafik. For some reason, who knows why, he pays attention to this map, and he happens to notice that in every area where Slothrop has put a star, within 2 to 4 days, a B2 falls. And so, remember that reversal? Well, here's another reversal. Apparently, it seems that Slothrop is anticipating where the bombs are going to go. Hard to know. Is he guiding them? Is it sheer coincidence? Who knows? But Tantivy Muckamafik tells this to people involved in a sort of underground. They're part of the official British response to the war to Germany, but they're sort of underground in the sense of like they're not overt, they're covert. Organization that's studying weird psychic effects and things like this. And, they have a guy, this is how the book begins actually, a guy named Pirate Prentice who can have other people's nightmares for them. And so he's having nightmares for some of the rich and famous, some of the powerfully placed people so they can continue the war effort without being immobilized by their own anxiety. Or at least that's the story. We'll get there, hopefully. Okay, so Slothrop has this map of sexual liaisons, maybe, in London, and Mucker Mafik sees it and reports it. And it matches up where the bombs fall. And so these people in paranoia is a good enough word for it, this psychic place, this white visitation, and the white visitation is called, I believe. Anyway, they decide, hey, let's study this guy and see what's going on. So they start to study him, mostly a guy named Ned Pointsman and a guy named um, uh, Mexico, Roger Mexico. And Roger Mexico is a statistician, and Pointsman is a Pavlovian. And this matters because of operant conditioning is the Pavlovian point of view, right? Where the stimulus happens and you get a reaction. So that's what Pointsman is looking at, and this reversal relates to other parts of Pavlov, which we don't need to get into. So they study Slothrop. Slothrop gets the sense he's being studied, but he doesn't know why, because he's paranoid because of the war, and he's paranoid anyway, maybe. And anyway, after D-Day, he goes to France to study more of the just uh, more of the documentation and more of the electronics of the V2. While he was in London, what he was doing was going to all the V2 sites and trying to learn as much as he could about what was left behind, what was going on. And he reports it by white visitation too. Okay, so before he goes to France, now I know I'm making a mess of this plot, but the plot's a mess anyway. Before he goes to France, Slothrop has this moment where he's pumped up with amytal nitrate or sodium amytal, and he has this vision of going down the toilet. It's him that has that vision, and Pointsman specifically uses this to look into what what white America fears about race or how race is dealt with in America. Now, what does this little scene, if I'm going to the toilet, really have to do with race in America in 45 or in 1972 when Pynchon published this book? That's a good question. That's a good question. I'm not sure what analysis it leads to, except for white people fear black people, associate black people with death. And that's very, very interesting because towards in this entire book, one of the if you even call him a villain, I'm not even sure if he counts because he's so abstract in many ways, is a guy named Blicero, who is Weissman from V. Blicero and Weissman are both coded as white. And towards the end of the book, like the last 2 or 4 pages of it, it talks about white being associated with death. And so you have a bit of a reversal here, is that it's actually the white that is causing death, and death is associated with white and going north. The Schwartz Commando associates north with going death with going white, going north, going white. Okay, so all of that. I'm making a mess of this. Okay, so Slothrop in France, the he is deliberately pushed into a paranoid flight away from the army. He goes AWOL and wanders around the recently liberated Germany, trying to find out more information about his past and about the V2s, the rocket, as it's called, and eventually he just dissipates. He has various adventures. He runs into Pig Bodine from V. Apparently, I was wrong. Apparently, Pig Bodine was serving in the armed forces in 45. So even though um, uh, V is set 10 years after that, apparently Pig Bodine was in the Army during World War II. I would have thought he would have been in the Army later than that, but he's still in the Army or the Navy or whatever it is, the Navy in V. So apparently he's a long-term soldier. In any case, Slothrop wanders around Berlin having crazy adventures, running into various individuals. He gets involved in the black market. He has a couple of firefights with leftover Germans, but mostly with Russians and Americans. It's just craziness. There's some Argentinian revolutionaries who wander through for no particular reason. There's the Schwartz Commando, the Black Rocket Crew. Um, okay, so what is going on here? Well, what's going on here is, I think, just a deconstruction of the entire concept of a novel, the entire concept of a plot. There are plots, 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 but is there a plot? No, there isn't. Uh, there's a lot of paranoia in here that they are the ones controlling things and nobody ever knows who they are. But that's not really, in fact, even really true. We do know. Ned Pointsman is deliberately manipulating Slothrop. It's not an anonymous they. And the war itself uh, is seen as not a fight between the belligerent Axis and the defending allies or any other kind of ally Axis kind of approach you want to take, but more as a moment in the overall advance of capitalism and particularly the technology of plastics and war machine and that sort of thing. And so this is just a market. Um, so it's a deconstruction of everything that you think you knew about this. Does it all work? I don't know, because it's not a construction. There is no construction being created here. Every structure in the book is eroded and deconstructed by either a lack of information or deliberate misinformation, or more than one story, or you know, you find out one thing and then later on you find out that, oh, maybe that isn't true. But you don't find out it's not true. You find out that maybe it's not true. And that becomes the main thing here. And this is where like Roger Mexico and Ned Pointsman become so important, because they have conversations where they're at loggerheads about things. They're talking about things from different points of view. And that is the entire way this works, which is you have an ideological point of view, and your ideological point of view drives what you see. And that's part of what Pynchon's getting at. What drives what you see is what you expect to see, and can you escape from that epistemological bind? So there is the very real decline of the West and the very real sort of deconstructive approach to concepts of democracy and enlightenment and all of that. But there is also this deeper epistemological kind of, is the human condition inherently unstable in this way? So that ideology rules what happens, not truth. And so objectivity is lost in that way. Okay, so the plot, such as it is, like I said, is just this guy wandering around Germany, um, shortly after the war, where things are chaotic and there is no certainty, and there is no government. See how that plays into the lack of certainty, the lack of cohesion. Um, and then all the darkness, all the crazy things going on here. Well, bear in mind that this is written uh, under in 72, 71, 72. Freud is definitely under suspicion, but Freud is still one of the guiding lights of psychology and psychological insight. And that plays a role here in terms of the deeply disturbed kind of unconscious of the West. Remember Pirate? Pirate who sees the dreams for other people. So what we're seeing here is we are seeing the nightmares, the dreams, the dirty secrets of the West under the surface. Now, remember how I said this wouldn't be written today? Part of it is that a lot of this is so well known today, partially because of books like this. At the time, this was way ahead of its time in terms of talking about some of these sorts of things. So there wasn't as much knowledge of these things in the public sphere. And so at the time this came out, this was still kind of cutting edge about talking about these kinds of things. I mean, I don't want to go into any of the language and details specifically because I don't really want to use those kinds of words here. But there are words here that you don't see very often in print here. And they're words that we know because, we live in the real world. Now, that said, I've read this book 4 times and it's a monster. It is difficult to follow. It is difficult to comprehend how crazy it is. As you can see in my very poor attempt to provide a plot summary, there isn't one I can really tell you exactly. The climax of the book, such as it is um, two different possibilities. One is the possibility of Tishreen and Enzian meeting. And you're like, who the hell are Tishreen and Enzian? You haven't mentioned them. That's right, I haven't, because that's how this book works. They come in later. Tishreen is a Russian who is, although it's not really dwelt on very much, he is apparently partially cyborg. So there's a nod back to V there and that kind of approach. And Tishreen and Indian is a black South African who is a previous lover of Weissman when he was in South Africa, and when he came back to Germany, he brought him with him, and he's part of the Schwarz Commando. So they are brothers. Well, half brothers. Tishreen's father, through a convoluted, weird route, spent a few months in Southwest Africa and impregnated his mother before he went on to wherever that boat was going, and he died. And Tishreen had been born earlier up in Russia. And Tishreen wants to kill Indian, and Indian wants to kill Tishreen. And they are going to meet. They're headed right towards each other. And because of the magic spell of Geli tripping, a young woman who is deeply in love with Tishreen, they miss each other. They actually exchange bread and talk and don't realize they are each other. And so, is that the climax of the book? I don't know. And interspersed with that is the other potential climax of the book, which is back at some point, somewhere maybe 3 or 4 months before that. The time scale is a little bit complicated. Um, Blicero, who had been Indian's lover, remember, he had in the book he is the lover of Katja and Gottfried, or Gottfried and Kaja are his sex slaves or something. I do not know. It's a whole sort of witch Hansel and Gretel kind of approach. In any case, Kaja uh, gets out and she goes to England and she's involved in getting Slothrop uh, uh, sensitized to his paranoia, and she feels guilty for that. But anyway, prior to that, she had been involved with Blicero and Gottfried. Now, after Kaja left and the world was coming apart, Blicero, in some kind of weird kind of maybe, I don't know, last sadomasochistic hurrah, or maybe some kind of atonement or something, he puts Gottfried in the rocket. And Gottfried's wearing a suit made of Emipolex G. And they shoot him off, I think, north. I don't know. Again, the death thing. This is where the death thing comes in. And Emipolex G, well, remember Slothrop is sensitizing to the rocket? Yeah, when he was a kid, he was uh, possibly sensitized to the presence of Emipolex G by Laszlo Jamp, a scientist, a Pavlovian, who was searching for, um, uh, operant conditioning, kind of, stimulus reaction. So he had Slothrop smell Emipolex G and then get a hard on, and he didn't take it back to the zero, beyond the zero. That's what the first part of this book is called. Um, and so he didn't brace it completely. It's still there, and so that's why Slothrop is still sensitized. Except, even though Emipolex G is an aromatic, what's called an aromatic plastic, aromatic has nothing to do with the smell. It has to do with a certain structure within the plastic. So either the narrator or Pynchon screwed that up, or the reader is supposed to realize there's nothing there. I don't know. And just to make it all the worse, you later learn that maybe Laszlo Jamp didn't even exist. And the time frame when he was supposed to have done this to young Tyrone, that doesn't work either. So again, like I told you, we had this structure built up, this elaborate structure, but it all falls apart. And we're not told Laszlo definitely doesn't exist. We're told he might not exist. So again, I think that this book is just a massive deconstruction. It is basically the id of the West. Uh, there's so much in here of just craziness, of just insanity, people reacting in sane and insane ways. Remember, the whole book starts with Pirate Princess. He wakes up, he gets out of bed, he goes upstairs to his bananery, picks bananas, watches a V2 come in, goes back downstairs and makes a banana breakfast for all of his friends. And in the middle of the breakfast, he gets a phone call, and it is his boss. He has to go out to this rocket that just, the one that he saw. Yeah, he has to go out to where that rocket hit because it was a dud, but contained within it is a message from him from Katja, And the way that he has to interpret this message is he has to masturbate and spread his semen on it, and that will make the invisible ink on it uh, become legible. That's how the book begins. Um, Maybe we never left Pirate Princess's dreams. Because shortly after this, he has a dream of an adenoid uh, in the throat, I mean, the nose or throat sinuses of a uh, British official. So, and the adenoid comes back later on in the book too, as does, the sentient light bulb Byron, who is the eternal light bulb. Um, but yeah, maybe we never left a dream. Maybe the whole thing is just a dream. And that's what I think is going on here is there's a sense in which we are being led to believe we're reading a novel. We're led to believe we're reading a narrative. We're led to believe we're reading about characters. We're led to believe we're reading about plots and points, but we're not. Not at all. These are brushstrokes, just like a modernist or postmodernist painter might put on a canvas to make an abstract. They're not a we're not in a Vermeer or a Rembrandt kind of realistic novel. We're not even in an impressionistic novel. We're past that. We're in a Pollock or a Rothko, or a Pollock because of the busyness. But we are not, or maybe even like a Warhol, an pop art. But what we're not in is we're not in a realistic novel. And if we read this as a realistic novel, we are completely and utterly missing the point. Just like we'd be missing the point if we tried to look for an actual representation of an image in a Pollock or in a Rothko. Whatever it is they're doing, whatever you think of their art, that is not what they're doing. And that is not what Pynchon's doing. This is not realism. This is something else. This is something altogether different. Do I recommend this book? Oh, absolutely, 100%. This book will change you. Do I recommend it to the faint of heart? No. Do I recommend it as a first read of Pynchon? Absolutely not. There's at least one or two guides out there, and I heartily recommend getting a guide to read this book, particularly the first time through. You will not understand what you're reading otherwise at all. You won't even know who the hell you're reading about. There were 400 named characters, and it is a mess. It is crazy. So yeah, I recommend it absolutely, but not to everyone, and not as a first read, and don't read it on your own. You will not make it. I didn't the first time through. Um, Talk to you later.